advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. Hope you guys are having a lovely day. I'm doing my best. Threw my back out this weekend. Went to the chiropractor this morning, and I am struggling. It's hard to sit, it's hard to stand. All I really want to do is lay down, but I don't have time for that. I can't do that. Because this was a big weekend. A big freaking weekend. Oh my goodness. Venezuelan President Maduro was extracted from the South American nation, and he was delivered to the Southern District of New York. Whole series of indictments against him and his wife. And I think that everybody here in the chat is aware of what that means. It's not just about Maduro. It's not just about cocaine, although cocaine is a big deal. It's also about the election. And, of course, keeping America safe. We've got plenty to talk about with Governor Tim Walz as well. He has dropped out, but I don't think that's going to save him. Definitely went to the chiropractor first thing. I've got another appointment on Friday. What I need from you, if you guys would, please hit that like button, help us out, sharing the show, and then sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we're about to get into it right about now. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I currently have a heating pad strapped to my back. I've got a back brace on its way. Should be here at some point during the show, so if I step away momentarily, it's going to be to put that thing on just to make it a little bit easier to stand here. Yeah, I've got my chair that I would normally be sitting in, but even sitting in that chair and, I've got armrests, I've got a leg rest, the whole thing, but it's not good. It's really, really not good. So the heating pad is going to be my secret weapon while we're live on the air today. Let me just make sure. Yes, it's on high currently. Also, smell like garlic right now because I'm slathered in DMSO. So hopefully this is going to get rid of this as quickly as possible. It's been several days, though, and it's marginally better from what it was on Saturday when it all began. But, here we are. So, yes, hot, cold. Well, I can't do the hot, cold every 15 minutes while I'm on the air. So definitely I will swap later on. But let us begin today, first of all, by confirming that Wisconsin judge, now convicted felon, Hannah Dugan, has officially resigned her position because she, as a judge in Milwaukee in the county circuit court, helped an illegal alien to evade ICE, and in doing so, she broke a series of laws. Now, in this video that you all remember, Hannah Dugan helped this illegal immigrant evade arrest by ICE there at the Wisconsin County Community Court. This was on April 18th and didn't take very long for the federal government to bring charges against her. She was found guilty of the obstruction and putting the lives of these ICE officers at risk. It was certainly a mockery of the rule of law, so ironic coming from a judge and a Democrat judge at that. The allegations against Hannah Dugan were serious, they were obvious, they were provable, and that's why the jury found her guilty. Now, she has put out a official notification with a letter letting everybody know that she is now going to be leaving her position. So you can see here on the official circuit court letterhead for the chambers of Judge Hannah C. Dugan. She wrote this 2 days ago on the 3rd to Governor Tony Evers. For the past 9 years of service, it has been the honor of my life and a daily blessing to be entrusted by Wisconsinites as their elected judge. to fairly administer justice to the thousands of people who have come before me, uphold our law and the Constitution, and keep our community safe. And she threw it all away for an illegal alien. During this last decade, I have served behind the bench and beyond the bench. Behind the bench, I have presided over thousands and thousands of cases with a commitment to treat all persons with dignity and respect, to act justly, deliberatively, and consistently, and to maintain a courtroom with the decorum and safety the public deserves. She's trying to give herself an out here, make it appear as if what she did was justified in some way. Beyond the bench, I have attended hundreds and hundreds of community events, listening to Milwaukee County residents voice their justice system experiences and concerns as jurors, witnesses, litigants, victims, and justice-impacted citizens who care about our courts. As you know, I am the subject of unprecedented federal legal proceedings, which are far from concluded. She is, of course, going to appeal the ruling, but which present immense and complex challenges that threaten the independence of our judiciary. I am pursuing this fight for myself and for our independent judiciary. However, the Wisconsin citizens that I cherish deserve to start this year with a judge on the bench in Milwaukee County Branch 31, rather than have the fate of that court rest in a partisan fight in the state legislature, because, of course, they were going to impeach and remove her if she didn't step down on her own volition. Therefore, Governor, with a heavy heart, I submit to you this letter of resignation and respectfully request that you give it immediate effect. My faith in God and our legal system leads me to trust that in the long run, justice will be served for our independent judiciary and for me. Justice will be served, Hannah Dugan. You will end up in prison, and I think a lot of people are going to be very happy about that. Let me very quickly refresh my feed over here on X so I can see if anybody plugs anything in. Now, as I mentioned, over the weekend, Nicolas Maduro was arrested in an operation in his compound down there in Venezuela. Yesterday, just before 5 p.m., President Trump's U.S. Department of Labor posted this image right here. It is a meme that says "Patriots in control," and it has a photograph of President Donald Trump, which actually appeared in the posts in the past. Patriots are in control, and we're never giving up our fight to put America first. This is obviously directly aimed at not only patriots who would recognize something like this, but of course it's letting the deep state cabal know that their time is done. The new world order is done, and the national world order has begun. President Trump bringing sovereignty, safety, security, and economic blessings to every nation on planet Earth. And we also have a very auspicious Delta today. President Trump shared the video of himself, that video that would get Trump elected. You probably remember that. Well, he shared it 7 years ago today. Well, not he, but the eponymous poster known as Q shared this 7 years ago today, January 5th, 2019, the exact same video, of course. And here we have it posted once again by President Trump. I feel like that is so in your face. I don't know what else to say about that. But even if you'd think that all of those posts are BS, at the very least, based upon the Patriots in Control post coming from that official government account, and then also President Trump reposting this video on a 7-year Delta, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not just totally like randomly deciding that he's going to share this video today. President Trump knows what's up. There's a reason that we elected him back in 2016. There's a reason that we brought him back after the stolen election in 2020, and of course, had him reelected in 2024. He is making good on his campaign promises right now. Now, you also probably remember last week it was announced that President Trump was going to be withdrawing the National Guard from several large American cities. Another thing that a lot of people have been waiting for would be the invocation of the Insurrection Act. President Trump, after the decision by the Supreme Court, seemed to signal, in a manner of speaking, that the Insurrection Act was potentially just around the corner. Well, President Trump spoke on Air Force One over the weekend, and he was asked about the removal of the National Guard, and he actually directly said, we are going back, and when we do, we are going to bring the military, and we're going to invoke the Insurrection Act. So I'd like to play that clip for you briefly, just as soon as I get past this commercial, and then this one as well.
Going to pay Illinois with that big slob of a governor that they have that doesn't want, you know, we brought down crime by 25%. He didn't do anything. He's not doing anything. But they want us to leave. He had a day where they had 17 murders not too long ago. 17 murders and 77 people shot. But 17 died. And then he talks about, oh, we can handle it. He can't handle it. But we pull back and we'll go in at the appropriate time. But we're the ones that brought the crime down. We brought it down 20%. They didn't bring it down. Pritzker didn't bring it down. Same thing with Gavin Newsom. If we didn't go in to Los Angeles 7 months ago when they had the riots, even the police commissioner, the head of the police, said if we didn't have the federal government go in, we would have lost total control of the city of Los Angeles, and they would have had to cancel the Olympics.
Sir, you said this. The National Guard, you pulled out the National Guard out of Portland.
We did.
In Los Angeles.
And you know what? You know that Portland, we got it down to almost no crime? You know that?
Frodo Baggins, thank you very much for the Bitcoin donation. Appreciate you.
But we pulled it out. We had a Supreme Court decision. We can go back. We're allowed to go back in. But we'll go back in when the crime starts. Look, the crime will soon start because they now know that we're out. And at the appropriate time, we'll go back in. And we may, if we're allowed to. The most powerful thing we haven't used, the Insurrection Act.
You're considering using the Insurrection Act?
I've always considered it, but we haven't needed it anywhere. 48% of the presidents of this country have used it. Bush used it, I think, 22 times or something. You know that, right? I mean, Bush the Elder.
Bush the Elder, like Pliny the Elder. So, as you remember, from that decision by the Supreme Court, they essentially told him that he would need to use the military before he used the National Guard. Absolutely stunning decision from them. It looked to me as if they were attempting to hamstring the president. Maybe they thought he would not invoke the Insurrection Act, but clearly they've given him a path directly to do that. It would become necessary if things got out of hand to the degree that President Trump is discussing right there. And without the people previously there from the National Guard to keep things safe, I think it's undeniable that crime is going to ramp up. It's going to get just as bad as it was before, and it will become necessary to do so. Now, over the weekend, the liberation of Venezuela. Now, there were all kinds of takes about this all across the board. I know that some people see it as regime change. Some people see it as an unjustified military action. Some people see it just as I do, as more of an extraction than simply an arrest. But I'll tell you what, it would appear almost universally among the people of Venezuela, they see it as a liberation. Now, the left, whether they're here in the United States of America or in Spain or in Europe, all around the world, they are pulling a hissy fit. They are crying mad over the fact that Maduro was arrested over the weekend. Now, what we've seen out of Venezuela is unanimous decision-making power from the people of Venezuela coming together and celebrating this move. Now, the dictatorship, so to speak, in Venezuela didn't begin under Nicolas Maduro. It began under Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil industry. He began implementing communism, collectivism, more like it. And he handpicked Nicolas Maduro to replace him after he had passed away. I'll have more to say about that in a little bit, but you can see the reactions from Venezuelans all around the world. They are celebrating. I didn't see a single video coming out of Venezuela which seemed to indicate that the people of Venezuela were upset in any way. Now, the same could be said down here in Florida, in many other American cities as well. It was universal celebration, unless, of course, the people that were upset about it were commies themselves. A lot of leftist Antifa types here in the United States. Here, come celebrate with us. We love everybody because you, America, has loved us so much. Thank you, America. This is people in Venezuela celebrating. Here they are tearing down the billboard of Nicolas Maduro there on the streets of Venezuela. Don't know exactly what city that is. Here is another video showing the people celebrating, singing, waving flags. Everybody appears to be very happy about this. They don't appear to see it as an invasion. Certainly, this was not an invasion. The United States of America had a series of special operations forces come in. They hit 4 key locations. They were military locations. At least one of them is alleged to have been a drone creating facility for Iran and for Hezbollah. I believe there was also something that was associated with a foreign military, whether it was Russia or China. Not exactly certain. And President Trump had said that Nicolas Maduro was living on a military base himself. So after the arrest, this calculated risk was taken to fly into the Capitol. They arrested Maduro. It was like 3 minutes on the ground, basically. There were no casualties among American forces. And the reason they were so successful is because Delta Force, this is the group that actually carried out the extraction, they had created an exact replica of Maduro's safe house, apparently, and they practiced over and over and over again. The actual operation was viewed by President Trump and a couple of select individuals, which included Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, and a number of others. They watched from Mar-a-Lago as this operation took place, and as these guys flew out, they brought Maduro offshore to the USS Iwo Jima, and then they sailed north, and they brought him home. There was some really odd stuff happening with that trip home. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it is alleged that the CIA had an asset on the ground in Venezuela who infiltrated Maduro's inner circle. But the CIA proper was not necessarily read in. Yes, John Ratcliffe was there, but they weren't watching this from Langley. And there also was some strange activity in regards to the CIA, as it were. Normally, the CIA probably would have had a major part to play in something like this, but I think that a lot of people here are aware of the corruption still existing within the CIA today. Just because John Ratcliffe is the director of the CIA doesn't mean that the CIA itself has been cleaned up or that the deep state elements have been successfully removed yet. I think that this was part of the effort to cut off some of that funding going to those compartmentalized aspects of the CIA that have been running the deep state operations behind the scenes. Now, here is law professor Jonathan Turley talking about the legal justifications for this. Now, Maduro has been indicted here in U.S. courts. And funny enough, Jonathan Turley makes a allusion to Manuel Noriega, who was the deposed leader of Panama, who was removed by the United States on the same day, January 3rd, 1989. Now, he was also alleged to have been a drug dealer. The interesting thing about Noriega, though, is that he was directly working with the Central Intelligence Agency for George H.W. Bush. He got a bit of a big head, and they made this big production about removing Noriega and taking him out of power. Now, whether that was to protect the Bushes, to protect the CIA drug smuggling rat lines, I don't know. I would assume that that was the reason that they chose to take Noriega out. I think that he probably got too big for his britches. But in this instance, I think it is far more likely that Maduro has been extracted as a cooperating witness with the federal government of the United States of America. Now, because of those prior actions and the fact that Maduro has been indicted in the United States of America, we have all the legal justification that we need to go down there and to pull him out. Now, here is some more evidence to suggest that the CIA was always in charge in Venezuela. It was not Nicolas Maduro. Perhaps at one time it was Hugo Chavez. But one of the things that Nicolas Maduro was charged with was being the leader of the Cartel del Soles, which is the Cartel of the Suns. And the Cartel of the Suns was actually created decades ago before Nicolas Maduro even took power. And I will tell you the backstory on Nicolas Maduro in just a moment. But this man, Jonathan Goudreau, he was a former U.S. Green Beret officer, and he was involved in another coup attempt in 2020 in Venezuela. It was alleged that the CIA, by Jonathan Goudreau, he alleges that it was actually the CIA that created the Cartel of the Suns in mid-1990s, and then would use the Cartel of the Suns to justify U.S. policies against successive Venezuelan governments. Of course, the Cartel of the Suns, if they're working on behalf of the CIA, they may or may not know this all throughout the ranks, but the CIA was always involved in cocaine trafficking. We know about the cocaine coming from Colombia into Mena, Arkansas, and then flowing into Los Angeles, the creation of the crack cocaine epidemic here in the United States. Well, you know, when one door closes, another one opens, and it becomes necessary to sort of change the tactics and the way that you're doing things. I think that the CIA was always the one in charge in Venezuela, not the only one in charge. I would imagine that there was probably other intelligence agencies from around the world, say Mossad, that was down there as well. We know that they've got a pretty good presence down there in South America. But there was not only drug trafficking, there was also human trafficking going on there in Venezuela. And as long as you had Maduro in the Western Hemisphere, in the southern portion of the Western Hemisphere, you had a boogeyman, much like you have Russia as a boogeyman in the Eastern Hemisphere, operating as a sort of foil to the U.S. intel and military-industrial complex, giving them a reason to continue operating in that area, and of course a reason to continue pumping money through federal agencies like USAID. So in the 1990s, the Cartel del Sols was created by the CIA. This is Jonathan Goudreau speaking. This isn't a secret. It's the truth. When asked to confirm whether U.S. intelligence was responsible for forming the group, he said, "Oh, absolutely, that's not new." He went on to cite a former senior intelligence official as the basis for his claim, saying the ex-head of the DEA had told journalist Mike Wallace that drug shipments arrived here through CIA trafficking in partnership with Venezuela's National Guard. The former Green Beret also said that the name Cartel de los Sols originated as almost a joke within U.S. intelligence circles based on the sun emblem on Venezuelan military uniforms. The operative also claimed that the CIA facilitated drug trafficking through this group. He said it was well documented, and he argued that the U.S. government, regardless of administration, seeks to protect the resources it gains through narcotics operations, linking current policy towards Venezuela to what he called an updated version of the Donroe Doctrine. Hold that one in your craw. And countering Russian and Chinese influence. So this is now a very different administration than administrations past. President Trump has a different perspective on how to keep the people of the United States safe. And the Donroe Doctrine, now known as the Donroe Doctrine, is certainly a part of that. But President Trump is not interested in continuing to bring the spoils of drug trafficking money into the United States of America if that means that the people of the United States of America are going to die as a result. Trisha, thank you so much for the donation over there. Appreciate you dropping those 20 subscriptions for the viewers on Rumble. You're the best. Thank you very much. Now, just backing up my position that Nicolas Maduro was not necessarily in charge. The people who directly surrounded him were not Venezuelan military. They weren't personal bodyguards. They were actually 32 Cuban security personnel. So Nicolas Maduro was quite literally guarded and surrounded at all times by special operations forces of another nation, certainly a nation that also has a thorny history with the United States. But if the Central Intelligence Agency needed Nicolas Maduro to continue operating in good faith and not destroy their cocaine trafficking operation, then it would make a lot more sense to have a foreign military force surrounding him that was also in need of money from illicit sources, because Cuba has a whole host of sanctions against them. Only in the very last several years have they even begun to re-enter the international community, but that relationship is still not very good. And there were no U.S. military personnel who were killed. There has been no reports that I've heard of Venezuelan military killed. However, all 32 of the Cuban special operators that were surrounding Nicolas Maduro and guarding him at his home, they were killed. It would have been very easy for Delta Force to kill everybody in the house, but it seems that they did they took every opportunity to kill every person that they needed to, except for Nicolas Maduro and his wife. So looks like Havana and the Cuban government have sent a delegation to Venezuela to pick up the dead bodies of the men who were killed in this operation. And the Cuban government said, true to their responsibilities concerning security and defense, our compatriots fulfilled their duty with dignity and heroism and fell after fierce resistance in direct combat against the attackers or as a result of bombings at the facilities. As I said, this wasn't a particularly long operation, so I don't know how much dignity or heroism they had an opportunity to truly show on that day, because our boys were pretty much in and out. President Trump said that allegedly Maduro was attempting to get into a safe room at the time that he was extracted, and he couldn't get the door closed. So there you go. Now, one of the weird things about this is that as they were taking Maduro from the USS Iwo Jima as they left Venezuela up to the Southern District of New York, there were a ton of photographs and even a couple of videos that were revealed of him. And it seems like he made like 5 or 6 wardrobe changes as he was on his way up here. And then once he got to New York, they quite literally took him on a private tour of New York City. They flew him around Brooklyn. He went past the Statue of Liberty. Every picture that they showed of him, he appears to be in really good spirits. He's given thumbs up. He's smiling. They even drove him through Brooklyn in the armored vehicle that he was being taken to the jail in. And they left the doors open so everybody could see him. It was like a parade for a man coming home, a hero coming home, which of course Maduro would be if by getting extracted, he was then given the opportunity to give the American government everything that they needed to know about the very bad people that were part of the drug trade in the nation of Venezuela. So let me get out of reader mode here and I'll show you some of this stuff. Here is the parade of taking him through the streets, and I'm just going to have to wait for this ad to finish up. Did you guys know that there was a fat loss supplement called AIDS years ago? Look at that. The door is open and he's in there. Now, you couldn't see it from this angle, but another angle was shown, and it was definitely the person they were saying was Maduro was inside that van. Now here, he's also walking into some detention facility in New York once he gets there. This is like wardrobe change number 3 or 4 at this point. He was also at some point wearing a blue hoodie, which was as yet unreleased by the company that created it. And they actually came out and they were like, I don't know how you got that, but it's going to be available this month. Okay, listen. So he comes walking in, he speaks to the press, he says something about Donald Trump, and then he says Happy New Year.
Good night. Good night. Happy New Year.
He seems to be in rather good spirits for somebody who's facing the death penalty or spending the rest of his life in prison. Here he is flying around the Statue of Liberty.
Watch what Apple's.
We'll take a look at this one in just a moment. Something Donald Trump and then Happy New Year. I couldn't make it out. Probably, could have been in Spanish, could have just been with a thick accent.
On the right side there, being held by the agent, that is quite possibly the president with his wife behind him. As they go around the buildings here, obviously a lot of protection being put into place as they walk over to the helipad.
Look, he's like pointing stuff out. He's like, over here is Ellis Island. This is where they would process the immigrants when they came here years ago.
Again,
Take a look around. Nicholas?
Not being able to see any faces, just judging by the protective gear and the way that he is being held by the agent there. And you can see to the right behind him.
Now let's get in the helicopter and let's take a flight around the Statue of Liberty. It's a beautiful sight. You're going to love it. There they go, flying around the Statue of Liberty. Totally unnecessary, but certainly pretty based. Now, let's talk very briefly about the Monroe Doctrine. What is the Monroe Doctrine? So this is now, and for many years was, an underpinning of U.S. foreign policy, and it falls right in line with President Trump's national security strategy that was released very recently. If you'll remember, it didn't barely say anything about Russia or China. It wasn't talking about these external factors. It was focusing on the U.S.'s sphere of influence. And it's been said multiple times over the last several days that the United States is focusing on the Western Hemisphere because this is our backyard. If you take a look at the position Russia has taken with regards to Ukraine and NATO and the expansion, it's a very similar doctrine to what Russia has been operating under as well. Now, the Monroe Doctrine was first articulated in 1823 by the fifth president of the United States, James Monroe. Probably not surprising. But it was formulated when Monroe wanted to ward off European powers from interfering in the affairs of countries in the Western Hemisphere, primarily the United States of America, but as many countries as we could hold them off from in both the Northern and Southern Hemisphere here in the West. Now, the United States has now readopted the Monroe Doctrine, but with President Trump's classically his own particular spin. Take a listen.
All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Doctrine. I don't know.
I love this. I'm not going to laugh this time because it's too painful, but I cracked up when I heard that, the Donroe Doctrine. Now, in the 21st century, the Monroe Doctrine, now the Donroe Doctrine, deals with a lot more than simply European colonialism, European expansion into the Western Hemisphere, the North and Southern parts of America, North and South America. What we're dealing with now is a lot more than simply nation states that seek to meddle in the affairs of the United States of America. They have been pushing for years for a globalist type of world order that President Trump is now pushing back on. The age of nations is now beginning once again. And in order to do that, we've also got to fend off from private military groups, from national military groups and national infiltration. But I think that most importantly, we are also fighting back against the intel community of various nations, including our own, and the military-industrial complex that comprises the larger segment of the criminal cabal that we've been fighting against for many years. This global criminal cabal of corrupt nations and individuals who seek to undermine the national sovereignty of places like the United States of America, and the undermining of the national sovereignty of Venezuela, because they were under the control of drug cartels, human trafficking cartels, gangs, transnational criminal terrorist organizations. All of this is part of being fended off by the Donroe Doctrine.
It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen.
You're gonna F around, you're gonna find out. Now, President Trump has been so clear about what he wants to bring to the world. He wants world peace. He wants economic cooperation. He wants national sovereignty. He wants liberty and freedom to be fostered in every nation on earth. It is not the same type of nation building and exportation of democracy that we saw under nations and leaders past here in the United States under Barack Hussein Obama or George H.W. Bush, and so on and so forth. Rather than forcing our way of life on other nations, President Trump, by bringing peace, by bringing national security, by bringing sovereignty to each of these nations, he is giving them all the opportunity to emulate the success of the United States of America. That is the Donroe Doctrine. That is keeping the United States of America safe by elevating the nations of other places here in the Western Hemisphere, in the North and the South, and making it possible for them to achieve what we have achieved without going into those nations directly and controlling them. This is why what's happened in Venezuela is not a regime change by my estimation. Was the leader of Venezuela removed? Absolutely. But there was not a ground assault. There was not a war. We didn't bomb civilians. We didn't kill innocent people. We have exerted our dominance, removed the figurehead of that nation, and now that figurehead is going to give the United States of America everything that we need so that we can successfully continue the dismantling of that global criminal cabal. Once again, here is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, commenting on the Donroe Doctrine as well. This is going to stick. This is not something that President Trump just said to be cute during that press conference on Saturday.
We are not going to be able to allow in our hemisphere a country that becomes a crossroads for the activity of our adversaries around the world.
And again, our adversaries are not simply nation states. Our adversaries are nations, transnational criminal organizations, rogue intel agencies running compartmentalized black ops, up to and including our own nation. And of course, the individuals who comprise and fund non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, and we've seen them be dismantled prior to this.
Just can't allow it. We can't have a country where the people in charge of its military and in charge of its police department are openly cooperating with drug trafficking organizations. We're not going to allow that. These things are direct threats to the United States, and we intend to use every element of leverage that we have to ensure that that changes. We are not.
So, in doing so, we picked up Nicolas Maduro. Now, I have seen people commenting on this photograph, which was taken in New York, and suggesting that it's artificial intelligence. Now, let me show you what I look for when I go in to identify something that may have been created with AI. First of all, if you've got a badge or you've got lettering, and you've got it in multiple places, in at least one spot, it's going to be totally incorrect. However, this is a U.S. Special Agent Department of Justice badge. This is DEA spelled out. Also, back here, you've got a Homeland Security badge. You've also got a New York State Police jacket. And actually, now that this may be a New York State Police badge, I'm not certain, but it's a little blurry. But at least one of these. So what AI does is it might be able to get one thing right, but then someplace else, it's going to go wrong. Now, you don't have any unnatural things happening with the feet. You've actually got shoe prints all over the floor. The lines on the floor all match up. The peeling paint back here looks to be totally legitimate. All of these things are natural. The lines match up. I don't see anything that's duplicated. A lot of times AI in the background, first of all, in a video game, what you're looking at directly, it's going to be clear. It's going to be as at 4K, crystal clear, and everything is going to look perfect. But then the further back you go, the more pixelated things are going to get, the less detail they're going to have. You don't see that in this image. You also have proper alignment of the hands. This is the same outfit that Maduro was wearing when he walked into when he walked down that hallway and he said something about Donald Trump and then Happy New Year. This is exactly what he was wearing. This is just another one of those outfits. Now, the only artificial intelligence that I saw anybody credit with suggesting this was created by AI was Grok. Grok does not have a sophisticated AI determination tool. What it's going to do is look on X and see what the conversation around something is, and then it's going to report that to you in its answer. So if Grok goes and picks up information that is incorrect, it may report that incorrect information to you as if it is fact. I don't see anything in here to suggest to me that this is AI. I think that this is a real image. And I think that it goes to show you once again that Nicolas Maduro does not appear to be in extreme danger. He doesn't look like he is about to spend the rest of his life in prison. He looks to me like a man who was just rescued from a bad situation in a nation where he couldn't afford to speak up. He gave hints, plenty of them, and we're going to look at one that we saw several months ago. But Nicolas Maduro could not stand there from the podium in Venezuela and say, the CIA is here, they are controlling the Cartel de Sols, and they're holding me hostage, and I can't leave. He wouldn't be able to do something like that because they would immediately kill him, and then they would scrub all of that from the internet. Now, continuing here, another great part of this activity this weekend is that people have taken photographs of Nicolas Maduro from his various wardrobe changes, and they have created some of the best AI videos that I've seen in my lifetime. This is one of those outfits that he wore, and I just want you to see it. I don't know what happened to the audio. It went out, but so good. So good. So good. I'm not saying pi squared that Maduro was a good guy. Obviously, the only thing that I'm saying is that Nicolas Maduro, in my opinion, was extracted from Venezuela, and that he is going to be state's evidence against the various people who were doing business with the cartels in Venezuela. That would include Democrats here in America. That would include those who were also involved with election fraud. That would include the nations surrounding Venezuela who were also doing business with the cartels. I mean, cocaine is native to Colombia. Colombia got so much heat for cocaine, and they were essentially taken over by rebel factions that were processing and selling cocaine. They were a narco state. There was a lot of attention that was paid by the Drug Enforcement Administration against Colombia. It only makes sense that they would move a little bit further away and that they would begin doing business in a place like Venezuela, which was in turmoil under Chavez. So no, I am definitely not saying Nicolas Maduro was a good guy. I think that Nicolas Maduro was in an untenable position, and he was being forced to operate as a figurehead. Does not mean that his heart wasn't in the right place at one point. I don't know. I don't know Nicolas Maduro's heart. And I don't know that Nicolas Maduro was in charge of everything that happened in Venezuela. In fact, I'm actually going to present something to you from Tony Saruga, which shows that the power structure in Venezuela was a lot more complicated than simply Nicolas Maduro being that guy. So just to touch on this, I think that, again, this is the reason why Nicolas Maduro was extracted. He couldn't come out and say what needed to be said. He couldn't turn state's witness. He would need to be brought to the United States of America. When you put this operation together with the other defectors who have recently been coming forward, giving statements about Venezuela as a participating factor in election fraud here in the United States of America, I think that these two stories dovetail perfectly. I think that, we'll talk more about election fraud in a minute, but I think that this right here, the fact that Democrats and perhaps even some Republicans in the United States of America were participating in drug trafficking with elements inside Venezuela, Cartel del Sol's number one among them being operated by the CIA, I think that that is why they are so nervous and upset about Nicolas Maduro being brought to justice here. Now, before we continue, I have a very quick message from our friends over here on Rumble. Let me get into this, and then we'll continue with this segment. You guys, if you have not yet tried 1775 coffee, I want to let you know you still have an opportunity to do so. You're not going to regret it. They've got several of those starter kits available. In those starter kits, you're going to get their bold dark roast that hits nice and hard, their smooth medium roast, which is what I like, and then their Vitality mushroom coffee, which gives you clean energy and laser focus, but without the traditional caffeine crash. All of it is from the highest quality beans you're going to get. Single origin, small batch, toxin, and mold-free. Not all coffees can say that. But you're also going to get a gold spoon clip because Freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A very strong frother, strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions. And you're also going to get the black 1775 tumbler. That's $170 worth of coffee and gear. It's yours for $99. And this is for everybody who's been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wonder if it's actually worth it. It truly is. So head on over to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Get yourself a bundle of bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. Check it out. You are not going to regret it. All right, now, a couple of things from the Pilled and Rumble donations. First of all, Deplorable Farmer, thank you for the can. Judy the Ladybug, thank you for the cookie. Thank you so much to Susan, VN, and Surter for both joining as monthly supporters. I appreciate you guys. Let's see. Lee Walden, thank you, sir, for the $20. He says, ahoy, Zach, Miss Lisa, and crew. You're doing good fighting through the pain. Thank you. Try stretching it towards the yacht. And I've got an ice pack. Hang tough. No laughing, damn it. Yeah. I'm in a really bad spot where I can't even stretch. Like getting into bed and then getting out again is so difficult. Like I can't even explain to you. I tried like getting down on the floor and stretching earlier, and I got this roller thing for my back, but it's tough. It's real tough right now. Lee also says, make sovereignty great again, MSGA. And then Sabrado says, now we know why Rand Paul is behaving like a complete retard. Yeah, Rand Paul is alleged by one of those Venezuelan defector whistleblowers to actually be on the list of American politicians who have received millions of dollars to attempt to thwart President Trump's agenda. Now, of course, he is was part of the Venezuelan government, and it's his assertion, or it's the public narrative that it's his assertion that Nicolas Maduro was running this whole thing. I don't think that that's the case. I think that Nicolas Maduro has got to be held up as the person to blame. And that's for a number of reasons, but mostly so that these people believe the Trump administration is simply following a trail that is going to lead to a dead end. If they believe that President Trump, like I am suggesting, that President Trump and the administration is fully aware of the American influence in the Venezuelan drug smuggling and election fraud, then those people are going to do everything they can to fight against President Trump and the administration, up to and including the most horrific things you could possibly imagine. They're already fighting back quite spectacularly. Thank you so much to HMed1, who says, Happy New Year, guys. Happy New Year to you as well. All right, now take a listen to this. First of all, well, actually, let me show you this first. So Nicolas Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, she was arrested with him. And what most people don't realize is that Celia Flores was actually known to the Venezuelan people as a politician and a public figure before Maduro was ever known to anybody. Now, Maduro has been in power in Venezuela since 2013. And as I said earlier, she is also charged right alongside him for narco trafficking, and she's facing the death penalty. Interestingly enough, at Maduro's hearing this morning, where he pled not guilty, and he also appeared to be totally mystified by the treatment that he received, how good it was, and all of the rights that he was afforded, she appeared to have fought back against Delta Force. She had like bruising on her face. The lawyer said that she had some broken ribs, and she was not doing particularly well. So she seemed to be a little more resistant to be taken by Delta Force than Maduro did. Maduro appears to have just walked up to them and held his wrists out. But Miss Flores, although many people have suggested she was, as the wife, a hostage in this situation, I posit to you that it was actually Maduro who was the hostage in this situation in the first place. So she was known as the First Lady of Venezuela, but before that, and many people during her time as First Lady have suggested she was truly the shadow ruler of Venezuela. But she's actually 6 years older than Nicolas Maduro. And when she met him, he was a bus driver, okay? He was just a common guy, blue-collar worker. He had no formal education. And she was powerful. She was intelligent. She was a lawyer. She was one of the most prominent attorneys in the entire nation of Venezuela. Now, they met in the early 1990s. And when they met, it was during a time when Hugo Chavez had attempted to conduct a coup against the government at that time. It did not work out. He failed. He was arrested, and then he was imprisoned. It was actually Celia Flores, the current wife of Nicolas Maduro, who was the head lawyer on the legal team for Hugo Chavez. She successfully got him released, and then, wouldn't you know it, Hugo Chavez then becomes the leader of Venezuela, and he chooses her bus driver husband to become his appointed successor after he dies, which of course leaves Celia Flores in a position of incredible power. So at the time that she and Nicolas Maduro met, she was already married. She had 3 children. Nicolas Maduro had 1 son, who I guess is nicknamed the Prince. He actually spoke earlier today in the Venezuelan state house, like parliament or whatever they call it. But Celia Flores was a key ally of Hugo Chavez, and Maduro described her as having a fiery personality, the kind of woman who lets you know how she feels. So Hugo Chavez kept Miss Flores 1 step behind in her career so that she would always remain close to Nicolas Maduro. He ended up going into politics. He rose to the head of the National Assembly, and then she did the exact same thing. And then in 2013, that is when Maduro is made the successor to Hugo Chavez. And then in the same year, she and Maduro, Flores and Maduro, get married, and their relationship is official. Now, here's the other thing about it. The several family members of Celia Flores have already been convicted of drug trafficking here in the United States of America. Back in 2015, 2 of her nephews were trying to sell 800 kilos of cocaine. That's a lot of cocaine. They were taken to the United States of America. They were convicted in the Southern District of New York, the same place that Flores and Maduro were brought for their arraignment today, in 2016, and they were both sentenced to 18 years. However, several years later, in 2022, President Joseph Robinette Biden grants them both clemency, and then they were swapped for 7 wrongfully detained Americans that were held in Venezuela. I believe that this was another attempted coup attempt. Now, I'm sure all of you here have heard the saying that behind every good man, there is an equally good woman. But in this instance, Celia Flores quite literally made the career of Nicolas Maduro. If it had not been for her proximity to Hugo Chavez, then Nicolas Maduro never would have been made the leader of Venezuela. He probably never would have become a member of the National Assembly. And she built his career. She brought him up. She ripped him out of obscurity. But I think that she was likely the one making the decisions and wielding the true power behind the scenes. Nicolas Maduro was merely a figurehead. So then it begs the question, the evil things that happened during Nicolas Maduro's time in office, was it him? Or was it his wife? Was it that witchy woman, as I see somebody pointing out in the chat? Not exactly certain. But there was more than just Flores and Maduro running the show in Venezuela. So this is from Tony Saruga. The military had a huge amount of power in Venezuela. He says that they are the true arbiters of authority. There is a faction within the Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana, the FANB. This basically functions as a criminal syndicate. They control huge parts of the Venezuelan economy. And they also control illegal mining operations in the Orinoco Belt. They control fuel distribution. And, of course, they're going to be controlling narco-trafficking corridors. So in order for Maduro to stay alive and to remain in power, it meant that he had to offer them a certain amount of fealty. The generals who run the FANB would have to be given cars, land, titles, and business rights to the nationalized businesses of Venezuela. Now, remember those 32 Cuban special operators that were acting as Maduro's personal bodyguards. The Cuban intelligence network, they had previously created a great sector of influence deep inside Venezuela's intelligence and security structures during the time of Hugo Chavez. Now, the Cubans trained Venezuela's Internal Intelligence Bureau, the SEBIN, and helped to construct the current surveillance apparatus that is in play down in that nation. Some analysts have described Maduro as managed by Cuban handlers, who then in turn would extract Venezuelan oil, medical supplies, and gold to sustain their own regime. Of course, they had a lot of difficulty getting it from anywhere else. So there's sort of a parasitic relationship between Cuba and Venezuela. Of course, that's probably not going to continue with the new government and the influence of the United States. But you can't forget about foreign power. Of course, you've got influence and the sort of power of Russia, China, and Iran, who have all become pretty critical to the survival of Venezuela over the last decade. Now, each of them gets something out of this relationship. China gets debt leverage and rare earth element access. Russia, of course, gets to a fair amount of geopolitical positioning and arms deals, trading back and forth. Iran, they need to evade sanctions. They also get fuel and gold that would allow them to build their drones and to operate military down there. The drug cartels, Cartel of the Suns, this is the thing that they are blaming Maduro with. But the senior military, who are also wanted in Venezuela, they've got links to Colombian guerrilla groups like FARC and ELN, both of which were instrumental in the destabilization of Colombia during the times when, the rebels were essentially running the country, before, during, and after Pablo Escobar's time. But between those Colombian guerrilla groups and then the Cartel of the Suns, which is made up of Venezuelan military, they had a hybrid criminal political cartel that would operate under the protection of the Venezuelan government. So this is one of the reasons why people will say that Venezuela pretty much is a narco state. I don't deny that. You also had parallel bureaucracies. These would be oligarch networks that would be tied to Hugo Chavez's old political circles. They would control things like import schemes, state contracts, manipulation of the currency. A lot of them are sanctioned, but they can continue to launder money and do business with places like Europe, Turkey, and Dubai. So Maduro sat in the emperor's chair. He was the guy who would do the interviews. He was the guy who would be front and center talking to the people. But all of these other individuals and groups surrounding him sincerely had a really substantial portion of the power. So again, much like his wife, I ask the question, who was it that was really pulling the strings? And how much more likely is it that these other groups operating in conjunction with the Central Intelligence Agency or Mossad or any other bad actors from other nations were the ones who were truly in charge of something like the cocaine trafficking? Certainly, the Colombian rebel and guerrilla groups were getting a fair amount of money out of this situation. It wasn't only the Cartel of the Sun. It wasn't only the government of Venezuela, but there were many different factions that were profiting off of this. Now, here is a very interesting fact. Maduro has hired the former defense lawyer for WikiLeaks Julian Assange. Barry Pollock is his name. He is and a former Houston federal prosecutor named Mark Donnelly is going to be representing Maduro's wife. Pollock has been a lawyer for a long time, over 30 years of experience, and he has negotiated some pretty intense plea deals, including the plea deal that got Julian Assange released. And you might remember Julian Assange had been charged with the Espionage Act, and they wanted to kill him. But that didn't happen under President Trump's first administration, under Joe Biden's administration. They ended up negotiating to have him released, and there you go. Now, here is Maduro being dropped off for court this morning in New York. And once again, I just want you to pay attention to his mood and his affect. There's his wife. Look at Maduro. He's smiling. He's looking up. He's like, whoa, look at this place. That's like the guy who just got off the ship and is seeing his brand new home for the first time. That's my estimation. Also, if you can take a look at this DEA jacket right here, the placing of the lettering and the placing of that badge and the shape of that badge, it's exactly like the picture that we saw that people were saying was AI. Oh, Hazel, I'm sure he feels safe now. I don't personally, if I was surrounded by 32 guys with guns that were always pointing them at me and telling me what I could and couldn't say, there's no way I would feel safe, even if it was my home country and I was allegedly the president of the whole place. He was held hostage, in my opinion. And it's quite clear that the government of the United States wants to make sure that nobody's going to take him out as long as he's in our custody and care. Now, do you remember this clip from several months ago? Again, I mentioned that Nicolas Maduro would have certain inside information about the workings of the drug cartels in Venezuela. He had previously said on a number of occasions, comments about this, speaking publicly and directing it at President Trump. In this clip right here, he says that 85% of the money that the cartel is laundering is laundered through the U.S. banking system. Go back to Panama and Manuel Noriega. That was during the time of BCCI, which was the Central Intelligence Agency's own bank that was laundering money for the criminal cartels down in South America and also for the Central Intelligence Agency and terrorist networks and so many other places. Just because BCCI went away, it doesn't mean that these organizations wouldn't come up with a different or perhaps a safer, more creative way to continue laundering money. I'm going to turn down Maduro because I'll have to translate this for you. But he says 85% of the billions from international drug trafficking each year is in banks in the United States. That's where the cartel is. Let them investigate and uncover it. Money laundering. Yes, money laundering. Money laundering. The politicians that were in league with these criminal cartels, these transnational drug trafficking organizations, they're going to bring their money and put it in banks here in the United States. Look, I was reviewing the data the vice president shared. And I believe it's over $500 billion annually. That's in the U.S. banking system, in legal banks. If they want to investigate a cartel, let them investigate the cartel up north. Because it's from the United States that all drug trafficking is directed, from South America and the rest of the world. They also control the opium trade and so on. And everybody in here knows that to be true. Remember when we went to Afghanistan, the Taliban did not allow the people of Afghanistan to grow poppies. One of the first things that happened when the United States went into Afghanistan was to secure the poppy fields and ensure that drug companies had access to those poppies, but also those poppies would end up producing heroin and a whole host of other narcotic medications. It's in the United States where the mafias are, where the real cartels are. And he's not wrong. He's absolutely not wrong. All of these corrupt politicians are using this money and they're putting it somewhere. Now, of course, Switzerland is another place where people would look. And Switzerland has publicly announced today that they are seizing all of the accounts of Nicolas Maduro. And if those accounts can be proven to be from ill-gotten gains, then those accounts will be handed over to the United States. But when they take a look at Nicolas Maduro's accounts, they're also probably going to see other accounts that were doing business with those accounts. Where did that money come from? What is that investigation going to look like? Well, they're going to be looking in quite a few different areas. And if Nicolas Maduro has account activity with, say, accounts here in the United States of America, then, of course, that's going to be something that needs to be investigated. Now, undo, close tab. So now we're going to start talking about the election fraud piece right here. This is, strangely enough, a piece from CNN in 2006, where they admit the orchestration of elections through the use of Smartmatic machines, the corporate hierarchy, and how those companies then came to do business here in the United States of America.
Antonio Mujica and his partner Alfredo Anzola received a small business loan from the Venezuelan government only months before the recall election. These corporate registration documents from Venezuela show the Venezuelan government owned 28% of the stock of another company they started, Bizta, which adapted voting software for the Smartmatic machines in the 2004 elections. The same document shows a Chavez government minister, Omar Montillo, was on the board of directors. The Chavez government...
So, Smartmatic and the election fraud scheme began before Nicolas Maduro ever came to power. The same as the Cartel of the Suns, having been created, once again, before Nicolas Maduro ever came to power. Okay? At that point, he was a bus driver. The man was not a drug kingpin. He was an average Joe. He was a blue-collar worker trying to get along. He had a son to raise, but then he meets Celia. He becomes a power broker. Next thing you know, he's running a country that had already created an election fraud scheme, was already involved in drug trafficking, and was already very cozily associated with guerrilla and rebel groups from Colombia. And, of course, the Central Intelligence Agency.
Government gave Bizta, Smartmatic, and another company a $91 million contract to run voting machines for the 2004 election. The next year, the owners of Smartmatic, primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen, bought Sequoia, one of the top electronic voting system companies in the United States, for $16 million. Smartmatic is a labyrinth of international holding companies owned by Venezuelan businessmen. Smartmatic Group NV of Curaçao, Netherlands, Antilles owns Smartmatic International BV of Amsterdam, Netherlands, owns Smartmatic Corporation of Florida, which...
How weird is it to see this report on CNN and knowing that in 2006, they were reporting on this, having all of the information about the corporate structure and hierarchy and the origins of these companies. And then in 2020, they told us that we were crazy, that this was a conspiracy theory, that Smartmatic was never a Venezuelan company, that it never had roots in Venezuela. Well, currently there are Smartmatic executives that are under indictment here in the United States of America. I believe that will also pull into these two stories as well.
Bought Sequoia Voting Systems of California, USA. When Smartmatic bought the U.S. voting machine companies, the U.S. government did not review the sale. Many experts say that...
And that was during the George W. Bush administration.
Those voting machines were manipulated in Venezuela to give President Hugo Chavez a victory. Exit polls done by the U.S. firm Penn, Schoen and Berland had Chavez losing 41% to 59%. But the next day, Chavez declared victory, reversing the score, saying he won 59% of the vote.
Everything was computed in the favor of the government. So the only explanation is that the Smartmatic machines had been programmed in that way.
A Harvard mathematician crunched the numbers on the Venezuelan election.
It had to be the Smartmatic system. All these machines talk to a central computer and report on their results. And in that mechanism, as they communicate with the central machine can report anything.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Zak Paine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela.
The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela. Now, I want you to think about all of the changes that have taken place since President Trump became president. The sale of Dominion voting systems, the opening up of their machines, and the personalized look that the government is getting at the software itself, the shutting down of the Serbian wing of Dominion, the obvious arrest of Nicolas Maduro, the exposure of all of these things. President Trump, since the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, has been on a tear, going through and sharing all kinds of videos from years past about Dominion voting systems in Colorado, in Arizona, in Georgia, Venezuelan stuff. President Trump is going hard on all of this. Take a look right here. This is an IT expert looking at a forensic image of a Dominion a voting machine from Mesa County, Colorado. And he talks about how it is being used to switch votes, how it was also done in Brazil.
Being awarded to Biden, and Jorgensen's totals being awarded to Trump.
After gaining access to a forensic image of the Dominion election management
Untamed Nation on Rumble, thank you very much for the raid. Appreciate you.
System in Mesa County, Colorado, IT experts demonstrate how easy it is to switch tens of thousands of votes from Trump to Biden in seconds.
All right. We know all of this already, so I'm not going to subject you to the entire portion of this video. But President Trump just kept going. He was on a several-hour tear. Here is one mentioning the ballots from Dominion voting systems and how these were flipped and used to steal the election.
I found that there were about 25,000 ballots that were not printed from the official Dominion PDF ballot. In other words, the printing process, appearance is completely different than what you would get from a first-generation PDF printing.
So, again, this is like a 6-minute video. We're not going to look at the whole thing because we already are aware of all of this stuff. But what we are witnessing is the flood portion, in my opinion, of the proof of election fraud. Because for years, President Trump, have been saying this over and over and over again. And every time we said that the election was stolen or that ballots were flipped or that they were printed off-site and then brought in, or in the case of Pennsylvania, that they were shipped from New York to Pennsylvania already completed, you know all of this. We're already aware of this. But now that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested, now that we have these whistleblowers from Venezuela who are telling us the exact same thing, now the Dominion voting systems has been purchased, now that patriots are truly in control of every aspect of this narrative, it is coming out, and it is coming out big time. It's not about convincing us. It's about convincing in a court of law. It is about proving the fraud. And now that we have people who have already been fingered for the fraud, every single person that those individuals were working for. Here's another one that President Trump shared, this time talking about Georgia and the theft that took place down there. Now, Brandy with the B says the reason the Democrats are losing their mind over Maduro is simple. The systems that made elections easy to manipulate are being dismantled. No more too big to rig. Honest elections are back.
This is how they stole it. This is how they stole it. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. This is how they stole it. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la. This is how they stole it.
The TCF Center in Detroit, the ballot counting situation in Georgia, the Freemans, Ruby and her daughter. It goes on and on and on. Well, This is slowly being revealed, and it is now in the point where it is just simply being flooded out into the market. Let me say thank you so much to Lee Walden, who says Maduro was looking for his new penthouse. Yeah. If they put him in witness protection, they would have to make it appear as if he was tried, convicted, and then shipped off to a supermax. And then he would be able to go live his life under an assumed name someplace else, or maybe they would just simply move him into protective custody. Missy Brash says comedian Adam Hunter says it's easier to capture Maduro than to find a kid in a Somali daycare. Hold on. Yes, that is absolutely true. All right. Now, again, I had mentioned that there were protests over the weekend, but these were not organic protests. These were paid protests, just as they were paid for at times in the past. Now, it turns out that one of our old friends, Neville Roy Singham, the Marxist resident of China and also a native son of Illinois, was part of the group that funded these Marxist protests and anti-U.S. protests that were taking place over the weekend. Now, you probably remember this article right here. A global web of Chinese propaganda leads to a U.S. tech mogul. That tech mogul is Neville Roy Singham. He's standing there with his wife, Jody Evans, who is the founder of Code Pink, another NGO, nonprofit organization taking part in the creation of these protests that are filled with paid protesters. But this article from 2023 talks about how Code Pink is basically a communist China shill front. Neville Roy Singham, as a tech mogul, pours all of his money into doing these things. The founder of Code Pink, the wife of Neville Roy Singham, Jody Evans, has got deep roots with the Democrat Party. She was a campaign manager in 1992 for former California Governor Jerry Brown. In the 2008 presidential campaign, she served as a host for the Obamas. She did fundraisers in Hollywood. At that time, she was married to Max Palevsky. He passed away in 2010 at age 85. They were working as campaign bundlers at that time. And then in 2017, she married Singham. Trump was the only president to not start any new wars in his first term, so he's not starting a war right now with Venezuela. This is not a war for Venezuela. This is a liberation, and it is an extraction of a state-protected witness. You've got all kinds of protests that you can see right here that took place over the weekend. They were largely anemic and fairly small, but they were funded by the Code Pink and Neville Roy Singham. Nothing about this was organic. And of course, these are the same people who benefited from the schemes that we've been discussing throughout this first hour and a half of the show. Now, there were also protests where Venezuelan citizens were present. And again, universally, at each and every one of these protests, the Venezuelan citizens stood up to the communists, the collectivists, and the Marxists, and they told them, this is a good thing. We are happy about this. What you are doing, standing up and saying, Viva Maduro, Viva Chavez, you people are morons. You don't know what it's like to live under communism. You don't know what it's like to live under collectivism. Thank you very much to everybody for hanging out with us today. If you haven't yet, please do me a favor, hit that like button. And if you would not mind, help us out by sharing the show. That would be super awesome as well. Real quickly, before we continue with some possible next moves, I just have a brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. Did you guys know that about 75% of the Nobel Prize-winning ivermectin that helped save lives during the pandemic is primarily made in Asia? That's something that we would need to change if we all start thinking about how this medicine might affect your lives. But the real cool thing is that the wellness company actually has it available right now. They have complete ivermectin that is being made here in America. It's safe, trusted, produced right here on our shores. For more than 30 years, ivermectin has shown a proven ability to eliminate parasites, and new research is also pointing to potential benefits for skin, immune, and cancer support. And most pharmacies are going to charge about $5 a tablet, but the wellness company is offering a higher 18 milligram dose for only $3.33 each. You're going to get a 6-month supply designed for 4 21-day cycles, and it's at an unbeatable price. You can get your U.S.-made ivermectin today by scanning the QR code you see on screen, or you can head over to twc.health/rumble and use the code RUMBLE to save $30 off, plus get free shipping. This is for U.S. residents only. Thank you very much, and let's continue here. Now, it would not be shocking to see that perhaps other leaders of nations who have their own handle on drug trafficking and illegal activity, if they were not nervous about what happened. Now, the leader of Colombia, who is Gustavo Petro, he's been chirping up all weekend, and President Trump actually responded to him. You might remember back in November, Petro actually dared President Trump to arrest him at that time, and he said that if you came in here, Trump, my nation would rise up in my defense. He is a former left-wing terrorist, and he is also, it is said, presiding over Colombia's enormous drug trade. He was clearly a close ally of Maduro, and he is allegedly devastated by Maduro's removal. Certainly, it's going to cut off a significant flow of money and cooperation between the Venezuelan drug traffickers and Colombian drug traffickers. However, if you take a look at what Petro has been doing since coming into power, he has also been indicting and convicting a fair amount of drug traffickers himself. Now, it could just be that in order to keep up appearances, he is prosecuting some drug traffickers, maybe getting rid of the competition for people that he wants to be successful. Or it could be that Petro has truly been attempting to clean up Colombia. However, in a place like Colombia, if you tend to stand up and speak a little bit too loudly, it's pretty easy to get your head blown off, and that obviously hasn't happened to Gustavo Petro. But President Trump over the weekend was asked about the statements made by Gustavo Petro, where he essentially, again, dared President Trump to come in and arrest him. And President Trump said, Colombia is very sick too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it for very long. This is not the first time in recent weeks that President Trump has made direct threats to Gustavo Petro. And he said, sounds good to me, when asked whether or not he would use the military to go into Colombia. Now, if we take what happened in Venezuela as any sort of guideway to what may happen in Colombia, it's already been put on the table that land strikes for these cocaine production factories are perfectly within the purview of the United States military. It happened in Venezuela prior to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, and it would not surprise me if something similar like that happened in Colombia. Now, Petro wrote on X, I don't know if Maduro is good or bad, or even if he's a drug trafficker. In the Colombian justice system's archives, after half a century of dealing with the biggest cocaine cartels, the names of Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores do not appear. Those who have come forward to denounce him are nothing more than Venezuelan opposition generals trying to undermine the popular vote. May be true. The judicial power in Colombia doesn't belong to me. It's independent of me and is largely controlled by my opposition. If you want to know about the mafia and the cocaine trade, you only have to look at the Colombia's judicial archives. That's why I deeply reject Trump's pronouncements of ignorance. My name doesn't appear in any drug trafficking related judicial files in 50 years, neither past nor present. Stop slandering me, Mr. Trump. This is not how you threaten a Latin American president who emerged from armed struggle and later from the Colombian people's fight for peace. I was part of the clandestine organization that fought for democracy in Colombia against the civilian dictatorships of the state of siege. The organization that in 1974, long before Chavez, carried out the operation to raise Bolivar's sword once again. Bolivar, who said he would never sheathe it until justice had ended in Gran Colombia. I was part of the M19, which made the first peace in contemporary Latin America. He doesn't read Colombian history, and that's why he's wrong when he criticizes us. He only needs to meet with his expert drug investigators in Colombia, whom I have assisted with my own investigations as a senator on the Colombian left and of its people who have suffered genocide at the hands of drug traffickers and their political allies, who are also allies of the American far right. Tens of thousands of our comrades in the armed and popular struggle for democracy were murdered. And we did not ask you for invasions. We endured and we won through peace. I have never burned a U.S. flag because I have read the history of the popular and worker struggles in the U.S. through Zinn's books in Spanish. And this is why I honor the American working class, the black and indigenous people, and the young soldiers who, with the Soviets, defeated Hitler. And that is why I dared to speak on the street in New York in front of the United Nations building under U.S. law, which protects the right of those attending the United Nations General Assembly to speak freely. I spoke out against the genocide in Gaza, how I would have loved to accompany you to make peace in Gaza. The Palestinians there love me. And perhaps instead of going to capture a Latin American president with limited control over oil because you blocked the oil supply, condemning people to hunger and triggering the exodus that reached your own country, I would have accompanied you to capture Netanyahu, a genocidal maniac. Because of what I said, you arrogantly decided to punish my opinion, my words against the Palestinian genocide. Your punishment is to falsely accuse me of being a drug trafficker and owning cocaine labs. I don't own a car, nor do I have any properties abroad. I still pay off my mortgage with my salary. It's unjust, and I fight against injustice. I have many friends in the United States who stop me in the streets and embrace me. That's why I respect the history that emerged with Washington and Bolivar together. They gave each other gifts. They were liberators more than slaveholders. I learned not to be a slave, and I reject your statements unilaterally assigning us to your domain. We Latin Americans are Republicans and independent, and many of us are revolutionaries. Don't think that Latin America is just a nest of criminals poisoning its people. Respect us and read our history, which dates back 30,000 years throughout the Americas. I read your history to understand you. Don't see drug traffickers where there are only genuine warriors for democracy and freedom. So, last month also, Petro likened the Trump administration to a clan of pedophiles who simply want to exploit the region for oil. A clan of pedophiles who wants to destroy our democracy. That could be taken in a number of ways. Obviously, we here are fighting against a clan of pedophiles who have embedded themselves within the United States government and within the annals of power here in the United States. So it's not like he's totally wrong. And past governments of the United States have explicitly used the excuse of oil to go into other nations, destabilize them, commit regime change, and then essentially consign those people of those nations to decades of horror and depravity. To keep Einstein's list from coming out, I think he means Epstein's list from coming out, they send warships to kill fishermen and threaten our neighbors with invasion for their oil. Harsh, yes, but that's the reality, he continued. And to keep the list from coming out, they send warships to kill fishermen from this city. That's obviously not happening. President Trump's administration has released more intel and paperwork and documents about Jeffrey Epstein than anybody else. So either Gustavo Petro is ignorant of what is really going down, or he is fully on board with it and has some level of understanding. I think it less likely that he would be fully read in on everything that's happening. However, once we continue forward with the movement on the trial for Nicolas Maduro and the release of information that he may have surrounding those who were doing business with these cartels, all of that is going to come out. And until that point, I see all of this as posturing between world leaders. However, President Trump and Marco Rubio have both commented on the possibility of Colombia being one of our next targets. Cuba as well. Cuba, the guy in charge there is Miguel Diaz-Canel. He has also come out and threatened America, and he vows that Cuba is going to give our blood and make the U.S. pay a heavy price. I don't think that anybody's worried about Cuba making the U.S. pay a heavy price for anything. If anything, Cuba is going to be in a reduced position of power as a result of Venezuela being transitioned into something else. Now, it was very interesting. After the arrest of Maduro, Russia came out and gave a statement which seemed to indicate that based upon this move by the United States of America, that Russia was now within their power to do the exact same thing to Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. And Viktor Orban earlier today of Hungary, is the president of Hungary, he came out and said that this tactical move by the United States of America undoubtedly is going to have effects and deliver similar results in other nations around the world.
And there will be consequences of the Venezuelan military action in other parts of the world as well. Thinking of it as an alienated event that has no impact on world politics would be naivety. So you must expect similar occurrences in other parts of the world. You have to face that. This is an unavoidable consequence of the new era.
So, could it be that other deep state leaders or leaders who wish to become participating witnesses with the United States of America might find themselves in a similar position? Absolutely. It could also mean that other global powers, such as Russia or China, they may end up doing similar things. How that plays out remains to be seen. But as I have said for a long time, Zelensky is holding on barely by a thread. But take a look at this. Marco Rubio commenting on Cuba and the situation there after the threatening comments that were made by their leader, essentially putting them on notice that unless they want to play ball, then they're going to find themselves in a very difficult position, and they may be in some danger themselves. Also, Gustavo Petro of Colombia.
Is the Cuban government the Trump administration's next target, Mr. Secretary? Very quickly.
Well, the Cuban government is a huge problem. Yeah, the Cuban government is a huge problem. First of all,
is that a yes?
Cuba, but I don't think people fully appreciate.
Now, judging by the Donroe Doctrine, Cuba being in our hemisphere, and for many years, essentially being a conduit for nations that are traditionally rivals to the United States of America, but certainly from other portions of the world, it would only make sense for us to use our influence to push Cuba in a new direction.
They're in a lot of trouble, yes. I'm not going to talk to you about what our future steps are going to be and our policies are going to be right now in this regard, but I don't think it's any mystery that we are not big fans of the Cuban regime, who, by the way, are the ones that were propping up Maduro. His entire, internal security force, his internal security apparatus is entirely controlled by Cubans. One of the untold stories here is how, in essence, you talk about colonization, because I think you said Dulce Rodriguez mentioned that. The ones who have sort of colonized, at least inside the regime, are Cubans. It was Cubans that guarded Maduro. He was not guarded by Venezuelan bodyguards. He had Cuban bodyguards. In terms of their internal intelligence, who spies on who inside to make sure there are no traitors, those are all Cubans.
All right.
So Cuba was the one keeping Maduro in line, as I said earlier. Now, also, take a look at this. Another country that ought to be worried is Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum. We've talked about her and the presence of the drug cartels in Mexico for a long time. It makes even more sense using the Donroe Doctrine to step up our enforcement of our own security in the nation of Mexico. President Trump here in this clip warns Claudia Sheinbaum and also mentions how she is petrified of the drug cartels. It's one of the reasons why she hasn't done what was necessary to root them out.
Think of that. And now we're going to stop them by land, too. The land is easy. We had to do the sea before we did the land because it just works out.
Yeah, you were just talking about the land, but it sounded like
And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it, but unfortunately, they
I remember one time you actually, speaking of Mexico, I asked you about Claudia Sheinbaum, and you told me at one point you had offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to combat drug trafficking there. Is that something you have spoken to her about?
I think she's a terrific person. I would say every single time I talk to her, I offered to send troops.
And she's just not willing?
She's concerned. She's a little afraid. The cartels are running Mexico. Whether you like it or not, it's not nice to say. But the cartels are running Mexico.
So that's not even like a what if. That is President Trump stating explicitly that Claudia Sheinbaum is afraid for her own life, likely the lives of her family members as well, because the entire nation of Mexico, at the end of the day, is being run by the cartels. Not something that I think is too surprising. And the cartel control of Mexico is even more closely intertwined with politicians here in the United States of America. I think that action in Mexico is a foregone conclusion. And after what just happened with Maduro, the clear threats that have been made to both Cuba and Colombia, I would expect that we're going to continue moving closer to the United States of America, Mexico being directly our neighbors. And the Mexican drug cartels are heavily responsible not only for cocaine, but also bringing fentanyl and other drugs, crystal meth, etc., into the United States of America. So perhaps unsurprisingly, on the 31st, just before the takeover of Nicolas Maduro, the Mexican authorities detained and delivered a high-level Sinaloa cartel member to the United States of America. This is Pedro Inzunza Noriega. He's also known as El Sagittario or El Señor de la CIA. And this is the first case in history where the United States is applying anti-terrorism legislation against a member of the Mexican cartel, because, of course, now they are known as transnational criminal terrorist organizations. This is a real-world deliverance of the new legal strategy that the Trump administration has created to combat the flow of opioids and other drugs coming into the United States through the cartels through Mexico. Noriega is 58 years old. He was arrested with the help of a joint operation by the Secretariat of the Navy, the Army, and the National Guard. They used helicopters, armored vehicles, and blockades in an urban area of Culiacan. 3 other individuals who are identified as operators of the same network were also captured. They had firearms, drugs, magazines, vehicles. All of it was seized. Mexican authorities immediately transferred Sagittario to Mexico City. They put him at the disposal of the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, and they've got charges in Mexico for him against crimes against health and possession of weapons, which were reserved exclusively for the Army, which means they had military weapons. And the charges against Sagittarios were filed in May of 2025 here in the United States in the Southern District of California. He was accused of narco-terrorism, material support for terrorism, large-scale drug trafficking, and money laundering. According to the Department of Justice, this man and his son ran an industrial-scale drug operation for the production and distribution of fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin, and they were smuggling thousands of kilos into the U.S. over the years. The terrorism designation is based on President Trump's executive order from February of 2025, where he classified Sinaloa as a foreign terrorist entity, and this allows for a minimum sentence of 20 years and up to life in prison. So, this is a return on the promise that President Trump made that we're going to treat these drug cartels as foreign terrorists. And it's not going to be the last time that we charge these people under these stricter and more stringent prosecutorial guidelines. I would imagine we're going to continue to see people like this. And if Claudia Sheinbaum wants to stay alive, if she wants to keep the United States out of Mexico, then she's going to have to deliver a lot more than just this guy and his 3 friends, including his son. Thank you very much to No Thanks Joe, who says, thanks, Lisa and Zach. I hope that you guys had a great weekend, and I look forward to this week's upcoming reports now that we're back on full week schedules. God bless and stay safe. Stay safe as well, brother. God bless you. Thank you for being here. All right, now let's talk about the Democrat response, because they are not happy. Senator Chris Murphy claims that the ouster of Maduro in Venezuela is actually not about national security for the United States. He also says that drugs from Venezuela are not coming here. We obviously know that that's not true. The United States has spent the last several months blowing up narco-trafficking boats in the Caribbean Sea, also heading in the opposite direction, trying to make their way around the islands. And Chris Murphy has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, or he is just supremely disingenuous. I think that both can be true, but in this instance, Chris Murphy is trying to make every case possible to suggest that there is no national security interest for the United States to secure our own hemisphere from transnational criminal drug traffickers. Now, the the White House has responded to Senator Murphy, and they have called him a buffoon because, again, he should know better.
Venezuela is not a security threat to the United States. They're not threatening to invade us. There is no terrorist group.
Now, Venezuela as a nation, we are not at war with. However, the Cartel de Sols has been labeled as a transnational criminal terrorist drug trafficking organization. They have been responsible for the importation of drugs and the deaths of American citizens. That is undisputed.
Like Al-Qaeda operating there that has plans to attack the United States to the extent that you care.
And the drug cartels have killed far more people than Al-Qaeda ever did.
The drug trade, yes, they produce drugs, but those drugs go to Europe. Fentanyl is the drug that's killing Americans. That's not coming from Venezuela.
No, but it is coming through Mexico. And the cartel operations are not isolated. Cartel operations in Venezuela connect to Colombia, connect to Mexico. And just because one product is coming from one country and then flowing into another country doesn't mean that it doesn't commingle and benefit the same cartels as the other products that are being brought into the United States, such as fentanyl and heroin and crystal meth.
This is cocaine. 90% of it is not coming to the United States.
Now that's obviously bullshit. There is a lot of cocaine heading to Europe, which is what Murphy is arguing here. However, the 90% reduction is due to the strikes on those boats that were going through the Caribbean Sea, and that was because of the Trump administration.
Seems to be mostly about oil and natural resources. Donald Trump's entire foreign policy.
Definitely, oil is a consideration. Now, when Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil industry in Venezuela, he essentially kicked out the American companies that built the infrastructure in Venezuela. However, Venezuela did not have the ability to process the heavy crude that they were pulling out of the ground. That infrastructure for processing was built here in the United States. So even though Chavez nationalized the oil industry, he was still having his oil processed by the United States in places like Alabama and Louisiana. It wasn't until the last couple of years when we stopped processing oil for Venezuela because of sanctions that were put into place that severely limited Venezuela's ability to process the oil, sell it, and then make money. That put tremendous economic constraints on the nation. But now that Maduro has been brought to the United States and theoretically Venezuela is going to open up to the free market again, the United States is going to once again start processing that heavy crude that Venezuela is sitting on. Marco Rubio said earlier today that Venezuela is basically out of space. They don't have anywhere else to put the oil, but the oil has to keep pumping. So although the United States is definitely going to get a tremendous profit from the oil they're going to process for Venezuela, the Venezuelan people are also going to profit tremendously. And they're going to profit even more than the United States of America. So again, Senator Chris Murphy, you're an effing idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about.
Corrupt. Russia, the Middle East, and now Venezuela is all about making money for his friends. And
now, the Middle East, that was definitely about oil, and it was definitely not about oil for the people of those Middle Eastern countries. It was all about profiteering for the friends of the administration at that time. No mistaking that one at all. Chris Murphy, you are correct in your assertion that this has been the de facto plan for the deep state running the United States government. But again, as I said at the beginning of the show, this is a very different administration. This is an administration with a totally different plan, and the benefactors of these operations taking place in the north and the south of the Western Hemisphere, the benefactors are the people of the nations, which are going to elevate socioeconomic cooperation and national sovereignty, not the global world order of the NWO that we have been fighting against this entire time.
Wall Street, the oil industry, they can make a lot of money off of Venezuela if they run it. You saw within hours of the invasion the announcement of a group of Wall Street investors, energy industry investors, planning a trip to Venezuela to make money off of this invasion, off of this ouster. So unfortunately, once again, you're seeing that this president's foreign policy, the invasion of Venezuela, the ouster of Maduro, is about making his crowd filthy rich. It has nothing to do with American national security.
It has everything to do with American national security. Chris, again, he is supremely disingenuous. Now, this is hilarious, but on that same program, CNN reminded Senator Murphy that in 2019, he wrote an op-ed for an American deep state paper where he directly called for the removal of Nicolas Maduro. Of course, you know, at that point, they believed President Trump was on his way out and he was never going to return. But you can see here, he gets called out for it. And I thought that this was hilarious.
In 2019, you wrote an op-ed and you called for Maduro to be gone. You said, let's get one thing straight. There should no longer be any debate about Maduro's lack of democratic legitimacy. The Trump administration is right to put restoring Venezuelan democracy at the center of our approach to this crisis. A return to a stable democracy is in the interest of the Venezuelan people and the United States and the hemisphere. We don't know what's going to happen with regard to the civilian leadership there. Tom Cotton was just here saying that he hopes that there are democratic elections. Isn't that what you want?
Well, the rest of that article right, was a criticism of President Trump's early moves to saber rattle around regime change.
But now I don't want any type of change in the government, and I just want to criticize President Trump still. Now, another way that the United States of America and the people of Venezuela are going to profit from this new investment and the new influence of the Trump administration and the Donroe Doctrine is the mining of silver and also gold and nickel and a whole host of other products which have recently, through these sanctions, been unable to move forward. Right now, Venezuela is sitting not only on a tremendous amount of oil, both above ground and in the ground, they are also sitting on massive precious metals deposits. Trillions in gold, silver, and rare earth metals are buried in the Arco Minero. Now, as a result of the removal of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, all of that is changing. And JP Morgan has recently gotten involved in the securing of a silver smelter deal to process all of these metals. And of course, we are going to benefit from this. This is going to be part of President Trump's golden age. However, again, the people of Venezuela are going to profit even more. P. Blue says, thanks for your excellent research. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Ooh, that is not what I wanted to do. Thank you very much for that $20 rant. Also, Berkey says, great show, Zach. Libs should be forced to listen to this cause they believe all the dumbass shit on the mainstream media. If we could get the liberals to listen to it, then hopefully I would have an impact on them. Macy says, finally got to do this live. Thank you for all you do and the way you present what is truth. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. Also, Lee Walden says, honestly, the most important subject that the Q board impressed upon me was human and in particular child trafficking in the end. And that's what all of this is about. Certainly that is a huge part of it. Now, here is something to consider as well. Maduro had previously said that he gave the information to the Biden administration about who was letting Tren de Aragua out and how they were getting into the United States of America. And the Biden regime chose to do nothing about it. He also offered that same cooperation to the Trump administration. And of course, that is going to be part of the information that he hands over, along with information about criminal activities related to drug trafficking. Sherman says, Zach, look into how much precursors for fentanyl comes from Canada. Can DJT come and get Mark Carney? He may be able to. Now, here's the thing. Depending on how those precursors are coming in and the deal that we made with China to stop the flow of precursors coming into the Western Hemisphere, we'll have to see exactly how that would go. But I would imagine Mark Carney has got to be a little bit nervous now, considering what just happened with Nicolas Maduro. See, the fact that we were willing to do this also impresses upon other leaders in the hemisphere that the Trump administration is not playing around. For some of them, simply the knowledge that this is even a remote possibility may be enough to force them to start thinking differently about how they want to operate. Sherman, thank you very much for that. ZBM says, thank you, Zach, for all your hard work and the great sponsors. It's been a big help for me. Here's to a healthier year, and I hope your back brace arrives soon, sir. Cheers. Thank you. Also, just figured that the bug I've been dealing with for over 2 months is another COVID. Ordered ivermectin for the first time thanks to this channel, and I was able to buy from a cheaper, great company. Man, I'm sorry to hear about that, and I hope that you get healthy and well soon. Thank you very much. And Johnny W. says, so when is Zach going to do some citizen journalism? I don't know exactly what you mean, but... I mean, are you talking about me like going out into the field specifically? I don't know. You'll have to elaborate a little bit more on that. All right. Now, moving on from the silver, here is Marco Rubio commenting on what the UN is complaining about, because the UN, in addition to Senator Murphy, is also claiming that there's no drugs coming out of Venezuela. And of course, we know that the United Nations has also been directly involved in criminal actions in the past, including child trafficking. And they have been accused, human rights monitors from the UN have been accused of raping children as well.
No, you're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source. And the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in the drug. I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about 1.5 years ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
So this is important for a number of reasons. Once again, it points to the changing of the world order. A lot of people have been asking for many years for the United States to just simply leave the United Nations. I would like nothing more than for the United Nations to be expelled from New York and for the United States of America to take back that building and to take back the land that they were so generously given during administrations of deep state past. But even if we don't leave the United Nations, simply allowing it to exist under the power of the United States of America, that sends a very important message as well, because they can say whatever they want. But if we continue to broadcast that whatever the United Nations does or says has no bearing on the decision-making of the United States of America, it continues to delegitimize the United Nations in the eyes of the world. And if we're no longer funding the United Nations, that takes away a significant level of their power. Reporting and digging up your own stories are different. So okay, so in order for me to go out and specifically investigate stories, I would also have to have the time and the opportunity to do so. Primarily, I am reporting for you what I find on the internet, drawing conclusions and bringing these things together to make a case for it. But this takes a significant amount of my time just doing this portion of the show. So I don't know what to tell you, bud. I don't have the budget to travel around, and yeah. So I guess that this is it. This is the show, and this is what I'm bringing to you. Now, Senator Tim Kaine has also in the past called for regime change in Venezuela, and he appeared this weekend and essentially blamed the United States under Donald Trump for the failures of not holding Venezuela accountable in years past. But of course, there were plenty of opportunities to do that under the Biden administration, and that was never something that they decided they wanted to do. But they will not accept the failures of administrations past. They will only attempt to blame President Trump for those failures. And instead of welcoming the changes that President Trump is making, of course, they need to attack it because those changes are going to lead to pretty significant breakdowns in the global cabal deep state order. So here we go.
Republicans would dispute, the notion that this was an invasion at all. But moreover, if Democrats cared so much about process, why didn't they do anything to bring Maduro to justice when they were in charge? I mean, the guy's been under indictment since 2020.
There have been sanctions placed against Venezuela, and I'll admit the sanctions have not been as effective as they might have been. And you know why, Jackie? Because many other nations wouldn't join us in the sanctions, even though they've joined us in sanctions against other nations. And why wouldn't they? They didn't like the President Trump, in his first term, threatening military action against Venezuela. And that caused them to back off support for sanctions. So sanctions and going into international forums and trade restrictions and embargoes and seizing vessels that are pursuant to sanction with a court order, these are things that can work. It's a lot better if you have your allies with us. What we've done now is push our allies away, and we've opened up.
I mean, I think the point I'm getting to, sir, the point I'm getting to is, don't you think that America's adversaries take note when all Democrats can muster is a joint statement or a press conference or some sanctions that are, loose and take?
So the point is that things could have been changed under previous administrations, but they never were, because people like Tim Kaine, people like Chris Murphy, people like many different politicians, such as Katie Hobbs in Arizona, they've benefited from these arrangements, and they have benefited from the payments that many of them were receiving. And we will get into those types of payments coming from fraudulent activities in Minnesota and other states around the country in just a moment. But just briefly, wanted to show you the judge that is going to be handling Nicolas Maduro's case. That's going to be a Clinton-appointed judge. This guy is 92 years old, Alvin Hellerstein, and he has, in many cases in the past, ruled against the Trump administration. Now, if it's Alvin Hellerstein that is going to be placed in front of this case to let Maduro go after he gives all of this information to the federal government, that would be kind of ironic. But it may also be that Alvin Hellerstein was chosen as the figure to oversee the destruction of the Democrat cabal and criminal apparatus that these people were engaging in this entire time. But he has presided over numerous cases that have that have ruled against the Trump administration, including the asylum seeker detention policy case from December of 2018. He presided over the release of Michael Cohen from prison in 2020. He also presided over the Deutsche Bank financial subpoenas, where they attempted to get President Trump's financial records in 2020. And there were a number of personal legal battles that President Trump was involved in, including the hush money case for Stormy Daniels back in 2023, a post-conviction hush money transfer denial back in 2024. In the second Trump administration, Hellerstein has been ever present as well. He slapped a temporary restraining order blocking the deportations of Venezuelan immigrants without notice of hearings early on in Trump's administration in April of last year. An extension and rebuke of the Alien Enemies Act again in April of last year. The preliminary injunction on the Alien Enemies Act, he does not want these types of prosecutions to take place. And now that we've got Nicolas Maduro here and this case is going to be moving forward, it should be very interesting to see how he rules after this. Also, he was involved in deportations of Palestinian activists, specifically Mahmoud Khalil. He was the guy from Colombia that was protesting against the Gaza war, and he was allowed to come back here to the United States. Missy says, When people call Tim Walz's office, they ask if Tim is in. Staff Sergeant Lucas Spots says, Zach, I'm feeling your pain. I had my second back surgery last month. I'm still recovering. Hang in there. It does get better. I hope that I don't have to have surgery, especially now that I don't have insurance. G.R. Dunlop is now a monthly supporter. Thank you very much, G.R. Dunlop. Appreciate you, buddy. And thank you again, Lucas, for that donation. Now, also interesting, this may come up in operations in the future, but the Military Law Task Force, this is a committee of far-left members of the National Lawyers Guild. They have issued an official statement calling for foreign governments to do what the administration has just done in Venezuela. They are calling for the arrest of President Trump, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as well, because Maduro and his wife were just arrested. They have also labeled Delta Force, the operators who raided Nicolas Maduro's campaign, claiming that they kidnapped Maduro and his wife and that this in and of itself constitutes a war crime as well. They are calling on foreign military powers and civilians to not service, fuel, load, or unload warships and warplanes. Many people would suggest this to be treasonous behavior, especially because these are people who are associated directly with the U.S. military. So I'm very interested to see how the Trump administration is going to handle this as well. This is a clip very briefly that I meant to have earlier, and I didn't place it appropriately. But Mike Walz, the UN ambassador, spoke at the United Nations earlier today, and much like Marco Rubio, essentially said that the United States is in control of its own destiny.
And now give the floor.
And we are going to operate how we see fit. Now, actually, this is a 10-minute clip. This is not the one that I wanted to play. But that is essentially it. Now, I think that statement by that Military Lawyers Guild is going to be especially interesting in the future because we now have a movement from the Pentagon and Pete Hegseth coming just on the heels of this operation in Venezuela, where Democrat Senator Mark Kelly has now officially been rebuked by the Pentagon. And this is still an ongoing investigation, but as a first move, the Pentagon and Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, have officially cut the military retirement pay for Mark Kelly for his participation in the Seditious Six video, where they suggested that members of the military should directly defy the orders of President Trump. Now, of course, Pete Hegseth could take this action against Mark Kelly because he was in a different position than the other members who were just members of the intelligence community, but also still sitting members of Congress. We don't need to watch the video again, but the statement from Pete Hegseth says 6 weeks ago, Senator Mark Kelly and 5 other members of Congress released a reckless and seditious video that was clearly intended to undermine good order and military discipline. As a retired Navy captain who is still receiving a military pension, Captain Kelly knows he is still accountable to military justice, and the Department of War and the American people expect justice. Therefore, in response to Senator Mark Kelly's seditious statements and his pattern of reckless misconduct, the Department of War is taking administrative action against Captain Mark E. Kelly, U.S. Navy retired. The department has initiated retirement grade determination proceedings under 10 U.S.C. 1370F with reduction in his retired grade, resulting in a corresponding reduction in retired pay. So they are posthumously reducing his rank. They are reducing his retirement. And to ensure this action, the Secretary of War has also issued a formal letter of censure, which outlines the totality of Captain, for now, Kelly's reckless misconduct. Don't know how much lower they're going to bring his rank, but they may reduce him as low as they possibly can. This censure is a necessary process step and will be placed in Captain Kelly's official and permanent military personnel file. Captain Kelly has been provided notice of the basis for his action, and he has 30 days to submit a response. The retirement grade determination process directed by Secretary Hegseth will be completed within 45 days. Captain Kelly's status as a sitting United States Senator does not exempt him from accountability, and further violations could result in further action. Again, this is still an ongoing investigation, so this is not the only action that may be taken by the Department of War, and Mark Kelly could still find himself in further legal jeopardy. These actions are based on Captain Kelly's public statements from June through December in 2025, when he characterized lawful military operations as illegal and counseled members of the armed forces to refuse lawful orders. This conduct was seditious in nature and violated Articles 133 and 134 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, to which Captain Kelly remains subject as a retired officer receiving pay. So, now that they've shown that they are willing to take actions against people who are still accountable to the Code of Military Justice, I am extremely anxious to see what they choose to do to those lawyers who just made a even more seditious and treasonous statement against President Trump and Pete Hegseth. I would sincerely hope that they take a similar action, if not even more exclusive action. Now, another video that President Trump shared on his Truth Social prior to Governor Tim Walz dropping out of the governor's race, because that is what we're talking about next. President Trump shared a video which seems to question whether or not Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was involved in the assassinations committed by Vance Belter, because as you're all aware, Vance Belter wrote a letter to FBI Director Kash Patel and said that he was sent to commit these assassinations by Tim Walz himself. So for President Trump to share this video suggesting that the assassination of State Rep Melissa Hortman and her husband and the shootings of the other state representative were directly related to the orders of Tim Walz, I find this to be pretty spicy. So take a listen.
Do you guys remember Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota state rep that had her life taken from her by Tim Walz's aide after voting to take away health care from illegal immigrants?
She was unalived in her home by Vance Belter, who was later caught after a manhunt. He then sent a letter to the FBI and Kash Patel saying that it was Tim Walz who forced him to do it. Both Vance Belter and his wife worked for Tim Walz for years.
Now, of course, Vance Belter was a political appointee of Tim Walz. His wife worked in the Walz administration inside one of the public agencies. Neither of them worked directly for Tim Walz. So I just want to clarify that.
Years in different states. Was Melissa Hortman unalived because she voted against a multi-billion-dollar money laundering fraud? The fraud that she voted against that heavily implicated illegal aliens, specifically Somalians, who have been racketing this kind of child care, health care rackets and cooperating with our corrupt government. And today it's breaking news that the money laundering scam in Minnesota of billions of dollars for healthcare offices, child daycare.
Yeah, it's not posthumous if he's not buried. It's posthumous in regards to his career. He is no longer actively serving. He is now a sitting U.S. senator. That's what I was referring to when I used the word posthumous.
Medicaid, and various forms of care agencies. These money laundering frauds have been exposed. And it all comes back to Tim Walz.
I did what leaders do. I stepped up and I got the job done for the people of Minnesota.
Very shortly after this, she was unalived in her home by Vance Belter. Vance Belter and his wife worked for Tim Walz for years in different states.
So the fact that President Trump shared this video directly on his Truth Social seems to indicate that President Trump is thinking about this in regards to Tim Walz and what's going to happen to him. Now, Tim this morning dropped out of the governor's race and essentially said that based upon the fact that he's going to have to be paying attention to all of this fraud, he needs to spend his full attention on this, and although he is convinced that he would be able to win a third term as the governor of Minnesota, it is better served for him to work on this fraud problem than anything else. He, of course, also blamed the Trump administration, suggesting that this is all political, but at the same time admitted that there is a tremendous amount of fraud that needs to be addressed. Now, it is also being alleged that Senator Amy Klobuchar and Attorney General Keith Ellison may jump into the race. Of course, Attorney General Keith Ellison is also directly connected to this fraud scheme, so it seems more likely that Senator Amy Klobuchar would be the one to jump in there. Now, it's also being alleged that if Amy Klobuchar was to win the governor's race in Minnesota, Governor Walz is hoping that she would then appoint him to fill her remaining years in that seat in the Senate. Now, also, Amy Klobuchar and Tim Walz met on Saturday before Tim Walz announced his retirement, and she also had purchased KlobucharForGovernor.com prior to Tim Walz dropping out of the race. So it's likely that there is this level of coordination and communication happening between the two. During Tim Walz's announcement this morning, he also failed to take any questions from the press, and they were pretty upset about it when he just walked away. But take a listen to this.
I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters, certainly not this president, not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And
within like the first couple of days of this new medical leave program that Tim Walz and the Minnesota State Legislature had passed, there were so many people who had already applied for it that it would be like $85 million they would be forced to pay out if they took the full 20 weeks that they were offered as part of this program. Let me just repeat that to you. Each individual in Minnesota can apply for 20 weeks of paid leave per year. They don't even have to give any sort of documentation showing that the person that they are claiming they are taking the time off to address is actually sick or is pregnant or, you know, that they've had kids. I mean, it's just like you can just apply on the honor system. And 20 weeks is almost half the freaking year. Nearly 6 months of paid leave each person in Minnesota is able to apply for. There is going to be so much fraud that happens as a result of this paid medical family leave program that I don't even know how they're going to justify it, especially given the current information about fraud that is coming out in all of these other programs.
at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Press. I'll be back tomorrow. Next month, more tomorrow. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And he just walks away. Wow. And the press is mystified.
Thank you, Press.
So anyways, it's about another minute of a hot mics of the press essentially just completely flabbergasted that Tim Walz walks away without answering any questions about the fact that he's leaving or even offering any sort of insights into what's going to happen next, other than for him to say, I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Kitsko says, I want to know why Amy Klobuchar isn't interested. She was on the list. I think it's because she is now going to be running for governor in Minnesota. And she's expecting to win if the election fraud scheme is still in place in the way that it has been in years past. Now, jumping back once again to President Trump commenting on Tim Walz leaving. You can see here, after Tim Walz's announcement, President Trump said Minnesota's corrupt governor will possibly leave office before his term is up. But in any event, will not be running again because he was caught red-handed, along with Ilhan Omar and others of his Somali friends, stealing tens of billions of taxpayer dollars. I feel certain the facts will come out, and they will reveal a seriously unscrupulous and rich group of slime balls. Governor Walz has destroyed the state of Minnesota, but others like Governor Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, and Kathy Hochul have done, in my opinion, an even more dishonest and incompetent job. No one is above the law. I think that Tim Walz is going to be charged in conjunction with this fraud that has been taking place in Minnesota. And all of the other governors that President Trump is fond of mentioning in statements like this are also likely going to be looking at charges as well. Now, President Trump here in this clip from Air Force One also comments on the level of fraud that has gone on, the amount of money that has been stolen, and what is likely to come.
Not even believable. This very stupid, low IQ governor, he's a very stupid man, because, you know, I had a campaign against him with JD, and he's a stupid man, and he's a corrupt politician, and the Somalians are ripping off our country to the tune of, looks like $19 billion, but that's only what they can find. So usually when you look at it 19, that would mean it could be 50, but the numbers are astronomical. Think of it, they have a dead country. They don't have government, they don't have anything. They don't have a military. All they do is run around shooting people and trying to capture ships. You know, we don't let them take ships anymore. You know why? We use the same exact missile on them that we use on the drug carriers. And it's very effective. So you notice there's nobody capturing ships anymore? Because as they head out to go capture the ship, and the ship doesn't want to fire back because it's very flammable stuff in many cases. And the insurance companies don't want, because they build $1 billion ship, and they don't want anybody firing rockets into the ship. But we're hitting them so hard, and it's very similar. Same missile system. It's called deadly accurate. And do you notice that ships aren't being taken anymore? The pirates are.
That's right. I hadn't thought about
the pirates aren't. Well, no
Somali pirates.
It's actually very easy. They head out. We say, guess what? There's.
Lindsey Graham is such an ass licker. He's just like always basking in the glow of President Trump's successes, seeing in what way he can try to push the administration to affect the goals that he is interested in. He's not successful, but he's always there to kiss President Trump's ass, isn't he?
Pirates, that's the end of the pirates.
Jan says, why can't the military intervene with all the corruption? What do you think is happening with everything that I have presented to you today? This is not something that the military can just walk in and just start arresting people. That's not going to happen. But the revelation of corruption at the hands of people that are being paid by the cartels, et cetera, all of this is being wrapped up and rolled out in such a way so that we can change the way things are done here in the United States, but not at the same time collapse the entire system. President Trump is gradually taking control of everything. He is proving this fraud and all of the corruption that has been taking place at the hands of politicians, and it will gradually come out. People will pay. Justice will be served. But it has to be done in such a way that the United States maintains its superiority and that things simply don't collapse. Jay Back says, hey there, from one Michigan back pain to another. Check out Dr. Rowe's YouTube channel in St. Joseph, Michigan. These videos help me a lot. Thank you, and Lisa. Happy New Year. Much love all. Thank you very much, dude. I'll go ahead and copy this, and I will bring it. I'll throw it in a notepad real quick, okay? Appreciate the tip.
The shipping business is coming back because, see, these are little things that we're doing. And I'm doing it not just for American ships, I'm doing it worldwide. Because we don't want ships taken by Somalia pirates. But what they are doing is they're stealing money from the American taxpayer. And every one of them should be forced to leave this country, including Ilhan Omar, who's a total crook. And she's one of the leaders of it. Not the only, because she's not that smart. But think of it. $19 billion at least they've stolen from Minnesota and from the United States. It's actually more from the United States because Minnesota puts in, and we're not going to pay it anymore. We're going to have Walz go pay. We're not going to pay them, and we're not going to pay California, and we're not going to pay Illinois with that big slob of a governor that they have.
So, getting back to President Trump mentioning all those specific governors, President Trump has said we are not going to pay this money to them anymore. This falls right in line with the word that we got last week about SBA and other organizations within the federal government cutting off the flow of money. That money is not just stopping flowing to Minnesota. It's also no longer going to be flowing into these other states. Now, in regards to that justice and how that's going to be achieved, it's got to go through the Department of Justice. We can't just have the military roll in and start wrapping people up and carting them away, because then, of course, President Trump becomes a dictator in the minds of the people who dislike him. He's already a dictator in the minds of many of those people, but this has to be done through the proper channels so that we can achieve a long-lasting and stable peace and the creation of the golden age. Now, again, with all of those various states, take a look at this. These are some connections put together by Steve Robinson in regards to a number of these fraudulent companies operating in the same way in Maine as they do in Ohio, as they do in Minnesota. So he says, let's take a look at a file for personal care agencies and see who's getting this U.S. taxpayer dollars. Under Maine Care, these services include activities of daily living. These are mobility charges, transfers, dressing people, helping them eat, helping them go to the bathroom, helping them bathe, personal hygiene, as well as related tasks like household chores, shopping, laundry, cleaning, medication reminders, stuff like that. So we are paying people to help do the things that we all do for free for ourselves on a daily basis. Looks up personal care in the Maine.gov website. And what you can find is that the number one company, First Choice Personal Care LLC, has state data showing that it was only first licensed in June. Now, the list has no name, but there is a Minnesota phone number and an address at a building in Bangor, Maine that is filled with office suites, very similar to Minnesota as well. But the fact that when you call them, even though the number is in Maine, it goes to a phone number in Minnesota. That becomes a direct connection between what is likely a fraudulent company in the state of Maine to the state of Minnesota. Now, you've also got this house that's associated with the company as well. The National Provider Index has that same phone number tied to Care Pledge LLC, which, of course, is a business owned by Ikram Sides Home Health Agency. And Mr. Sides' mailing address and primary practice location can be seen in these pictures right here. He doesn't appear to have a website, so it must be a lot of word of mouth. And corporate records show that Ikram founded Care Pledge 1 year ago with somebody else named Fardosa H. Mohammed. Ikram Saeed, whose phone number was the one used this summer to register a taxpayer-funded ass-wiping agency as Maine, is also a Minnesota daycare operator. Once again, more connections directly to so much of this fraud taking place in Minnesota. But he also runs a transportation agency with somebody named Asli Hindi. So your taxpayer dollars are also funding that transportation agency, Care Pledge Transport LLC. They were founded in November of 2024. Now, jumping back to the state of Maine, because this is where this all started. The LLC isn't registered to Ikram, but it's registered to somebody named Zachary Abdi. In a remarkable turn of events, Mr. Abdi also has 2 taxpayer-funded businesses in Minnesota. This, again, is another cross-web connection from Maine to Minnesota. Business number 1 is registered at the Ethiopian Taste. This is a halal and Ethiopian-friendly market, which you can see right here. These are their foundation documents, Settlebridge Health, LLC. That is business number 2, but they have a much nicer address. It's a $440,000 5-bedroom home in Blaine, Minnesota. And property records show that this home is owned by Hassan Abdu Khalider. Remember, this all started in Maine with the first company, and that name was plucked off the taxpayer-funded ass-wiping agency list. So take a look at the second company on the personal care agency list, 5 Stars Home Healthcare by Mustafa Al-Hamadi. He's already familiar with this one on account of public records showing it scammed us for more than $1 million. They got audited by the state of Maine. They were then dissolved, but there were never any legal consequences. And the owner now runs an auto shop. He still has an office suite, which was visited last week by the people at the Maine, what is the name of his, Main Wire, the Main Wire, that's his paper. Taxpayer records show that his business, which is registered out of taxpayer-subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, was audited for a period covering November 1st of 2021 to October 31st of 2023. And Maine Care records show that he was paid $41,000 in 2022, $550,000 in 2023, $432,000 in 2024. So that's a total of just over $1 million. Only $592,000 was subjected to the audit, so just about half of total. DHHS found $390,000 was fraudulent, meaning that there was zero documentation submitted to support the claims that they were charging to the state of Maine, that they were helping to wipe people's asses. They just submitted invoices to the state paid them. So that is an estimated 65% fraud rate based on a small sample of the more than $1 million that was paid to Al-Hamadi, who lives in Westbrook Point Public Housing, and he is only 25 years old. And it goes on and on. Subject after subject, business after business, connection after connection, going directly from these two states where there are large Somali populations. So you've got connections for fraud between the Somali populations from Ohio to Minnesota, from Maine to Minnesota, and they are currently digging up connections from Washington to Minnesota, which, again, there is a huge Somali population there as well, Oregon to Minnesota, and Arizona to Minnesota. So it appears that much of this nationwide Somali fraud seems to have been based in or perhaps developed in Minnesota. And once these people learned how to commit the fraud, they transitioned to these other states where Somali populations were based, and they began to do the exact same thing they did there. Tricia says, I recall years ago that Trump and someone else warned that all governors were in the crosshairs of this administration. He or his spokesperson said, we know who you are. It's happening. Yes, I agree with you. And I think that in President Trump's second administration, this is finally the point at which we see all of this come to fruition. Let me say thank you to Mighty Patriot for the phone as well. Judy the Lady Pug, who says, you are a citizen journalist of the first sort. I appreciate that. 123SKG, thank you for the cookie. And Filter Dog, thank you for the can. Now, one question that a lot of people have asked and that President Trump has suggested time and time again, and it's also been confirmed by the administration that this is on the table, is the denaturalization of people who have committed fraud against the people of the United States of America and various administrations. Well, Senator Eric Schmidt has just submitted new legislation to make it that much easier to revoke the citizenship of those people who are defrauding the United States of America or committing other felonies that they are found guilty of committing after they've taken their oath to become a citizen of the United States. So quite literally, every single one of these people who may have a criminal record now after they have become citizens of the United States or are found to have committed fraud in any of these various businesses, whether it's home health care, the Feeding Our Future, transportation, the daily living things that we were just talking about, all of those people now, after the introduction of this legislation, are going to have a much easier time losing their citizenship and being kicked out of the United States of America, which is, of course, exactly what we want to see. Oh, and I'm sorry, I don't know why this isn't working. This was kind of a joke. I'm not going to play it because we are running low on time. All right. Now, I think we'll go ahead and end it here because this ties in directly with the investigation into Act Blue and all of this fraud that we have been discussing for the last several weeks. It would appear that Democrat election committees have been receiving more than $1.5 billion from so-called unemployed donors. When we look at Act Blue, they've gotten almost $700 million from unemployed donors who are donating small amounts multiple times to avoid scrutiny. These are people that may or may not even be real, or they could just be the stolen identities. And of course, this is what is described as smurfing. Now, in October of 2024, there were 2.9 million separate transactions that were reported. This is, of course, right before the general election in 2024. And data suggests that committees are using high volumes of small donations so that they can launder money and avoid reporting larger donations. Much of that money, I am suggesting, is coming from these fraudulent schemes that are happening in a variety of different immigrant communities throughout the entirety of the United States. 4.9% of Americans are unemployed, but almost 30% of all FEC donations are coming from people who are listed as unemployed. So, of course, the only logical question you can ask is, where is all of that money come from? If that money is coming from fraudulent sources that are being derived from the United States government, well, that becomes a pretty easy answer. But I would still suggest that you're getting a lot of money that is coming in from illegal overseas sources and then are being laundered through these so-called unemployed individuals who may or may not know that their names are being used. But essentially, you can quite honestly infer that large sources of money are being laundered into campaigns using this situation here. Fraud being perpetrated through ActBlue, smurfed in the names of people who, again, may or may not know that their names are being used. The sad thing is that when James O'Keefe and others have confronted people whose names have been used in these situations, they seem to have no real problem with it happening. Their attitude is kind of just, well, the money may be coming in my name and I didn't donate it, but at least it's going to Democrats. Well, maybe they'll feel differently about it when they learn that the money is being stolen from people exactly like them. Redeemed D says, I left you donations on redpill78news.com, hopefully. Wanted to make sure you saw it. Happy New Year. I so love your show. I watch it every day and sometimes twice. Much love to you all. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I don't get notifications when people donate through the website. At the end of the month, I get like a report from Stripe. And so I see that donations have come in, but I see people's real names and their names never align with names that I see in the chat. So I will just say thank you. And as long as it was through redpill78news.com, then that was definitely me. And it will definitely help to benefit the show. So I really appreciate it. All right. Before we go, just one final message from our friends over here on Rumble. Now, you guys, of course, have probably noticed if you're on Rumble, they are growing fast. They're not slowing down anytime soon, and they're really working to build a real alternative to big tech that puts creators first and actually protects free speech. Now, of course, there is Rumble Premium. It's an easy way to upgrade your experience and, of course, benefit the shows that you watch. With Premium, you get ad-free viewing across the platform. There's no pre-rolls, no interruptions, just the content that you came for. Plus, Premium members unlock exclusive content like bonus videos, behind-the-scenes drops, and more from your favorite creators. And right now, Rumble is offering $10 off an annual subscription. You can take advantage of that by heading over to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO at checkout. Once again, that's rumble.com/premium with the promo code STUDIO. No more ads, more freedom, and content that you actually care about. That's the deal. You can use that QR code right there or the link that you're going to see in the chat. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you very much for hanging out with us today. And if you want, you can join me tonight at 10:30 on Baseless Conspiracies on Badlands Media, or you can come back tomorrow at 5 p.m. right here for another episode of Red Pill News Live. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Don't forget about the final sponsors of the program, which includes my friends over at onenessdrops.com, onessdrops.com/redpill78 to save 15% off their chlorine dioxide water purification kits and everything they offer, DMSO, mullein extract, the soursop tincture, and so much more. Check that out. Also, mypillow.com if you want to support Mike Lindell's run for governor. MyPillow.com, use code RP78 to save up to 80% off of everything that Mike offers there. Amazing American-made products. Pillows, sheets, slippers, bathrobes, towels, all of it. And of course, my good friend Jordan over at consciousstrength.net. Don't know why that's not working. I guess looks like he's updated the website. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is where I get my methylene blue. Shilajit gummies are also great as well. They offer everything that you could possibly want to keep yourself and your pets healthy. Vitamin C drops, DMSO here as well, Myco coffee, oregano oil if you're facing any type of illnesses. And finally, Prepare with redpill78.com for My Patriot Supply's survival food. Right now, you can get their winter survival kit with $400 or more in free gifts when you purchase all of that survival food, and it comes with a heater. You can also get their solar generators with solar panels and pretty much anything to keep you fed during the apocalypse. So thank you for being here. Good luck. God bless. And I will see you guys either tonight or tomorrow. Peace. Oh yeah, c60evo.com/redpill78. Right now, they still have 40% off for the New Year holiday offer. c60evo.com/redpill78. Oop, wrong button. All right, I also set up a raid to send you guys over to Quite Frankly, and he texted me and asked me to call in. So I'm going to call in and talk to Frank for a few minutes if you guys are heading over there.